What is the purpose of life? Well, those of you who have been at Wesak last year, you may think, we're going to have a déjà vu, because last year we spoke about the purpose of life. And we established that the purpose of life is not to become God, because God we each are, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, whether we believe it or not. The purpose of life is to realize God. And to realize God means to make God real in our reality. And in order to make God real in our reality, we need to learn and think like God, and speak like God, and act like God, and demonstrate God on earth. So, we established that the purpose of life is to emulate God's consciousness. Because in emulating God's consciousness, this is how we become more and more godlike in the way we express ourselves. And so this is how we realize God, and this is how we realize the purpose of life. But anyway, so here I am again, asking you again, what is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is not just to make a conscious effort to emulate God's consciousness and to become more and more godlike in the way we express ourselves and to thus realize God. The purpose of life is also to then go forth and use our consciousness in planetary world service. So the purpose of life is to then go forth and channel our God consciousness and use our God-realized consciousness in service of humanity and in service of planet Earth and in service of the spiritual hierarchy which overlights and runs this planet as a whole. So essentially, the purpose of life is to live a life of purpose. Now, if the purpose of life is to live a life of purpose, and if living a life of purpose means to use our consciousness in planetary world service, then I think we should ask ourselves two questions. First, what is consciousness? And secondly, what is planetary world service? If the whole purpose of life is to use our consciousness in planetary world service, then I think we should get totally clear on what is consciousness and what is planetary world service. So what is consciousness? If you ask 100 people to define consciousness, in most likelihood you will get 100 different definitions. So I would like to look at the question of consciousness from a more occult lens and perspective. What is consciousness? Consciousness. If you meditate on the word consciousness, it soon grows evident that the unfoldment of consciousness, the development of consciousness, is all about growing conscious. It's all about becoming conscious. And the unfoldment of consciousness is intimately connected with the activity of mind, with mental capacity, with the ability to think. And it is this very thing, it is the ability to think, it is the possession of mind, which is the mark of humanhood. It is the ability to think which distinguishes the human being from the so-called subhuman being. It is the ability to think which distinguishes the human kingdom from the subhuman kingdom. The subhuman kingdom is the kingdom of the animals and plants and minerals. The kingdom of minerals does not think. Minerals have a very solid and earthly and grounded form of awareness. The plant kingdom takes it a step further in that plants are already responsive to feelings and emotions. And we all know this to be true, because if you communicate with a plant in loving sentiment, then the plant will respond accordingly. And it is this capacity of the plant kingdom to respond to feelings and emotions which accounts for the famed green thumb that many people have in this world, which bring just about anything to bloom. And now the animal kingdom takes it another step forward or further, in that animals are not only very responsive to feelings and emotions, but animals actually have the ability to think. Animals have a little bit of mental capacity. And this is evidenced in the fact that animals do possess a nervous system. Now, of course, as we all know, the sophistication of the nervous system within the animal kingdom differs greatly or varies greatly from being very simplified to being very complex. And as such, as we all know, so-called invertebrates don't have a brain, they don't have a spinal column, and they may just have a very simple form of a nerve net running through their body, or maybe a bunch of nerves clustering together to form some kind of a precursor for what could become a brain someday. But so-called vertebrates have a brain, they have a spinal column, and they have a very complex and sophisticated nervous system running through their bodies. We can draw the conclusion that the existence of a nervous system within the animal kingdom indicates mental capacity, even if it's just a little bit, because the nervous system is occultly linked with the so-called consciousness principle. The consciousness principle is anchored in our brain and works through our nervous system. The consciousness principle is what allows us to grow conscious. And just like the consciousness principle is anchored in the brain and works through the nervous system, the life principle is anchored in the heart and works through the blood system. What is it that makes our heart beat? Obviously, there's no battery in here somewhere that makes our heart beat. At least I don't think so. And our heart is also not plugged into any kind of electrical outlet. So what makes our heart beat is the so-called life principle, which extends forth from our monad. And just as the life principle gives us life, the consciousness principle gives us consciousness. And so this is why we can draw the conclusion that animals have a form of consciousness, that animals have the ability to think, at least to a certain degree, or else they wouldn't have a brain and nervous system to begin with. Let's quickly recap. So the mineral kingdom does not think at all. The plant kingdom is responsive to feelings and emotions. The animal kingdom is responsive to feelings and emotions and even thinks a little bit. And now the human kingdom takes it another step forward and further, in that the human kingdom has the ability to think. And it is the ability to think, the possession of mind, which distinguishes the human being, again, from the subhuman being.